Okay, so let's directly delve into the passage. Let's start reading this. We think of reading as primarily mental activity. Medieval and early modern audiences saw reading as a physical activity as well. They did not just turn the pages of their manuscript, they wrote in the margins, underlined and annotated, used blank spaces for recipes and handwriting practice, kissed religious images and copied out quotations. Pop-up signs texts evoke a period when reading always meant physical engagement. Now, understand that this is where the picture starts. Okay, pop-up signs texts. The first line, first para of this entire passage tells me that there is something more to do with just reading. Okay, there's something that we keep on saying our students, that you should not just read it like a leisurely activity reading a newspaper. You should always be reading with an intent of gathering out the arguments. So what is the argument presented in the first para? The first para, pretty much the argument is that there is a bit of you can say physical activity also related to a reading, which is otherwise may be considered as an ideal activity. Let's go to the next para. Okay. The first illustration of a body with liftable flaps was printed in Germany in 1538 by the printer and engraver Heinrich Wachther. An immediate success. Pop-up anatomies were soon published in France. Okay, again pop-up anatomies. I think if you have taken the test, you must have realized that it started with a very simple connotation that reading is a very interesting activity, reading makes you feel good, this and that, and then suddenly they are taking you to the different direction. That is when you should have realized that this is again going to be a difficult passage. In terms of questions, I don't know, I haven't seen the questions as of now, but in terms of language, definitely the passage can be a bit challenging. So let's read ahead. So we discuss about the immediate success of the pop-up anatomies, which is a sort of a book which pops up one way or the other, that was published in France, Italy, Netherlands and England. Most consisted of single sheet known as fugitive prints. Okay, so this is something which is interesting. Fugitive prints. Fugitive, I don't know. I know the meaning, of course. I really don't need to know the exact meaning. That is the agenda that I keep on saying. Okay, so fugitive prints that could be bound into books or pinned to the walls. Okay, interesting. The figures in these prints all look very similar, but a curious reader can peel back their skin to reveal the layers of the lungs and liver, heart, guts, all the way to the thoracic cavity and the spinal column. They are usually accompanied by extra material written in vernacular rather than Latin. These texts can be considered a rough summary of the university. These texts can be considered the rough summaries of the university anatomical handbooks. Okay, so anatomical handbook ka summary hai these whatever this pop-up books, but they were also elaborate. They were elaborate if crude typographical artifact designed for a popular audience. Interesting. So what exactly does this thing tells me? Starting from reading, directly jumped into a very conducive idea of that there is some pop-up literature, pop-up books that is there. This pop-up books again is taking you back to the anatomical idea, in which how Heinrich Wachther, the printer and engraver, saw the immediate success of pop-up anatomies, the book that was designed using mostly single sheets that were called the fugitive prints. Okay, I hope the main idea is clear. It's talking more towards the fugitive prints or the pop-up anatomies, a book which may be opened up into something. Let's read ahead. In 1538, Andreas Vesalius published the tableau, which was a set of 6 large sheets. So see friends, even if you do not understand the meaning of tableau, don't worry, the passage itself should give you some clue, which is which in fact it is given, which was a set of 6 large sheets intended to be a memory aid for medical students. Okay, so we are talking about this Vesalius fellow has published something that was designed to be a memory aid for the medical students. Interesting. Vesalius recognized that the illustration could not replace the real experience of dissecting bodies. The images nonetheless provided users with a very good eyewitness account of the dissection of a human body. Most anatomical text, however, had few, if any, illustration, and the writing was highly advanced for highly advanced and intended for a specialist audience. So Vesalius basically designed something which was specifically designed for the medical student. They had some highly advanced this thing. I think it is self-explanatory. Let's go ahead. By contrast, the pop-up prints pioneered by Walther were attractive and striking and provided a more accessible substitute to the comprehensive and complex diagram of Vesalius. Okay, so even if you have to reread this, you should reread this. I will not reread it. You can pause and reread it. The elementary terminology, simplicity of the metaphors, and considerable space devoted to illustration suggests that these prints were intended for a non-specialist audience. Please understand, who are we talking about? We're talking about Walther. Walther is the person who designed, maybe the pioneer of the, the fugitive sheets or the pop-up anatomy book, whatever. Okay. As opposed to, why am I saying it? Because I am trying to deconstruct the argument. Vesalius basically designed the tableau, which was designed for medical student. Walther designed something similar to that, which was designed for a common janta. Okay, let's read ahead. Walther's texts are short and are bound in a pamphlet style. Frulich, another printer who knew Walther, reprinted the fugitive sheets in 51-52 but colored the figures to make them look less austere. Okay, let's not get into the nitty-gritties. There are also versions that started to include simple home remedies to accompany the sheets. Interesting. The inclusion of home remedies in the anatomical text suggests that they were being used in private spaces, not just university lecture halls, and that there was therefore a general desire to know more about the inner workings of the body. This, I think, is a very interesting line. This takes you from Walther and the other person, Vesalius, and directly, gives a different perspective into it, that how the general janta now started, having the perception of the book. Okay, let's get deep into this. This is the last para. I think this should conclude the passage in itself. Fugitive sheets allowed their readers to reflect on the meaning of life and death and on the frailty and transience of human body as opposed to that of the immortal soul. Anatomy now reached a much broader section of the society. This is where the conclusion will lie, I am pretty sure. All of their idiosyncrasies. Do we really need to know the word idiosyncrasies? You can probably pause at this moment and you can, charge up your dictionaries or whatever that you have with you and find the meaning. We don't really need to do that. The comprehension should tell us. Idiosyncrasies, what? The elementary terminology, the vernacular language. Vernacular basically, the chalti language, the type of language that we use, maybe which is not very grammatical in sense, but, jo chal jata hai, something like that. Lack of details, pamphlet form, addition of color and missionary style of composition demonstrate that their printers were responding to a call from non-specialists to know more about human body, but also that printers were attracting and shaping readers' interest. Okay. So basically we have mota understood the main idea. It started with reading and how reading is helping individual people here and there, and then we straight away jump to the anatomical pop-up books. Finally, from Vesalius, who designed these books for medical student, to Walther, who designed it with some ideology, but then this Frulich, the other printer, somehow transformed it for the common janta who might not know a lot many things. Then there are some nitty-gritties. We will not get into that. Let's directly go into the question. This is a difficult passage, or so I think. You may think it is a very easy. If you think it is an easy one, kudos to you. Which of the following best expresses the main idea of the passage? Let's read. We don't really need to go back to the passage. Let's read. Please understand, what are we looking at? We are looking at the main idea of the passage. Pop-ups became prominent when there was a rising demand for the books on a scientific subject. Pop-ups become prominent. Is this the main idea of the passage? Are all the arguments constructing to this thing? I don't think so. So this cannot be the main idea, of course, getting rid of it. Pop-up books originated in the 16th century from a general desire to know more about the human body. This is again not, because I don't know whether it started with a desire to know the human body, or even if it was, it is not the main idea, because the arguments go from one way to the others. Okay. The arguments basically should tell you. Anatomical pop-up books helped popularize the study of anatomy in the 16th century. Actually, this, if you look now, this is a strong proponent, but let's read ahead anyway. Pop-up books and fugitive sheets provided a specialist an eyewitness account of the dissection of the human body. Where is human body's dissection coming into the picture of this entire passage? There it is present as a component in the passage, but the human body dissection is not in its entirety the main idea of this passage. So this also goes out. So basically this takes me or leaves me with the option number 3 as my answer. Okay guys, I want to say that in the LMS portal, the Competition Crusade website, in the portal itself, this was I think option number 1. So please do not mix and match things. This is the answer. Actually, I randomized the options and some mistakes has happened. This is going to be the answer. Okay, based on the passage, which of the following cannot be inferred about the anatomical fugitive sheet, something which Vogther designed? I hope you remember that. The content of the fugitive prints was not very accurate. Now see, this is something which I would like to keep. The content of the fugitive prints was not very accurate. But remember what exactly are we looking for? We are looking for the following that cannot be inferred about the anatomical fugitive sheets. Okay, they were written in the vernacular for the popular audience. This is something that was that can be inferred, so goes out. They were sometimes used in the university lecture hall. This is given in the passage. I'll take you to that also. So that way I'm eliminating this option. They elaborated on the university anatomical handbooks. Now please understand, between 1 and 4, both of them, there is going to be a sort of a closeness in terms of the answer choices. So 1 tells me that the content of the fugitive print was not very accurate. The other one said that they elaborated on the university anatomical handbook. Actually, that is not the case. We are supposed to find out something that cannot be inferred. These texts, they did not elaborated on the university, so could be used as a refresher, could be used as a summary, something of that sort, but they did not elaborated on the university anatomical handbook. Now let me take you to the passage, just a second. Okay friends, so if you pay attention to this line, which I have also highlighted over there, just give me a second. This one, these texts were considered rough summaries of the university anatomical handbook, but they were also elaborate. If crude typographical artifact designed for a popular audience. So this was designed for a popular audience. They were rough summaries of the university anatomical handbooks. Now let's go back and read the options. Very good one. I think you guys will be very surprised. How can you miss out on these? These were elaborate. The fugitive texts, these were elaborate, but they were not elaborating on the handbooks of the university. They were not elaborating on the handbooks. They were in fact the summaries, but they were themselves elaborate. I hope you understood this. Okay, this is a clear case of misunderstanding. So यहाँ पे तो आपका ये हो सकता है. This question, if you got wrong, completely understood. This is a difficult question. Okay, so this is not going to be the answer. 4th one is going to be the answer. Okay, let's go ahead. I don't want to waste time. How much? Yeah. The presence of the simple home remedies in the fugitive sheet suggested that. Now, if you want to go to the passage, you can go back and you can read. The inclusion of the home remedies in the anatomical text suggests that they were being used in private spaces, not just university lecture halls. Therefore, a general desire to know more about the inner workings of the body. Please understand, they have given the example and then the idea is, so there is an example, there's a premise, then the argument, then logically you will conclude. So there is a conclusion in the last. So this is the premise. The inclusion of the remedies in the anatomical textbooks suggested that they were being used in private spaces, and therefore general desire to know more about the inner workings of the body. So that is the process through which you will eliminate the options. Let's go to the question options then. Non-specialist audiences trusted the sheets more than they trusted their doctors. This is again something which is clearly out of context. Goes out. These prints were used outside clinics and hospitals by non-medical professionals to cure diseases. Definitely not. University student would never rely on home remedies. University student, I don't think so. This is also nothing of that sort is given. Non-specialist audience relied on fugitive sheet to understand their body better. Basically this is the conclusion that I was talking about, right? So the home remedies were there, and then people were using it to know their bodies better. So this was not that difficult. This was easy if you could just go back and read the passage, or rather the paragraph. Which among the following would the author most likely consider as the most significant aspect of the fugitive sheets? You see, the entire passage is comprising of a lot of infer type questions. So let me take this one over there. Okay, so which among the following would, what are we looking at? The author most likely consider as the most significant aspect of the fugitive sheets. Okay, the fugitive sheet best demonstrate how reading is not merely a mental activity but a physical activity also. Is this the most significant aspect of the fugitive sheets, that they are not merely a mental activity but a physical activity also? Definitely not. So goes out the first chance. Fugitive sheet introduced the concept of illustration in the medical text, which had until then few, if any, illustration. Fugitive sheet made people ponder on the meaning of life and death. So this also goes out. Why? I'll tell you. Just hold on. Fugitive sheet made people ponder over the meaning of life and death and the fragility of transience of the human body. Fugitive sheet made anatomical knowledge accessible to those who could not access it through the existing publication. Now please understand, this is not the type of question that can be answered without going back to the passage. So you have to go into the passage. So the third option, which said that fugitive sheets made people ponder over the meaning of life, the fragility and the transience of the body, let us read that thing. Okay, so it is written over there that the fugitive sheets, let me change the color. The fugitive sheets allowed their readers to reflect on the meaning of life, death, frailty, transience of the human body, as opposed to the immortal soul. Anatomy now reached a much broader section of the society. Please understand, guys, students, that we are looking at logical, critical reasoning, verbal reasoning. We are looking at verbal reasoning. Verbal reasoning has a structure through which you will eliminate options. The option is, there is a premise, then there are arguments, and after a lot of deduction there is a conclusion. So this is the premise, that fugitive sheets allowed their readers to reflect on the meaning of life and the frailty and the transience of the human body as opposed to the immortal soul. The conclusion, however, is that the anatomical sheet now reached a much broader section of the society. This is something that the author will also use as his conclusion, or he will consider as the most significant aspect of the fugitive sheet, that the fugitive sheets made anatomical knowledge accessible to those who could not access it through the existing publication. And please understand, Waughther is the only person who did this thing. Ki this was designed for the general. He may have designed it for a very specific purpose of giving summaries to medical student, but then eventually Frulich come into the picture, Vesalius come into the picture. Vesalius all the way, did not really give that much importance, but this fellow Frulich, the printing continues, and now it went to the general janta. The fugitive sheet made it accessible to those who could not access it through the existing publication. I will again take you back. 3 is definitely not the answer. I will again take you back to this one and tell you that this line, that but also that printers were now attracting and shaping readers' interest. So this is the greater common, or the greater good that came out of this thing. Okay, so so thank you. I hope you enjoyed this. I don't